Around the world, we're looking for leaders to solve the global pandemic that's before us. With cases that now are numbering in the millions and deaths that are in the hundreds of thousands, we recognize that crisis leadership at this point in time is different and requires different behaviors and different leadership decisions. The stakes are higher and the challenges are greater. I'd like to welcome you and glad you can join us for this edition of the GLS Next event. GLS is here to serve and to help you, and we want to help you grow in your leadership and be able to increase your leadership in this significant time. Leadership matters, and now it matters more than ever. It's exciting to be able to have viewers from all around the world. And we're here today with the founder and senior pastor of Life Church and also the Global Leadership Summit champion, Craig Groeschel. And he's going to be talking about leading through the storm. And then we're going to have a time of question and answer following that. And we're excited to be able to look and help you be able to grow in your leadership today. On the screen below the video, you'll find a place that is there to submit questions. We encourage you to start sending in those questions as soon as you have them. And if there's a question that comes up during Craig's talk, please go ahead and put it into that area. Our team will compile them and we'll be able to dive into them later and have Craig share at that time. With this global audience, I know we're going to have some great questions and we're going to have great conversation today, as well as great content that Craig's going to share to help you be able to grow in your leadership. Thanks, Craig, so much for being with us today, and we'll toss it to you.
Well, thanks, Tom, and a big welcome to leaders from all over the world, from India and from Africa and from Europe and from Canada. It's a great honor to spend an hour with all of you. And like Tom said, in a bit, we want to kind of wrestle with some of your questions. And so I want to talk about what's most important to you all. But it really is an honor that you'd spend an hour with us. And I wish we were in kind of a different setting in the world, but we are where we are. And so I want to talk about that a little bit today. And just as Tom said, leadership is always important. We know that. And that's why it's really an honor to speak to you all, because you are the people that can make a difference in your nonprofits, in your businesses, and in your communities as well. And right now we know that leadership is even more important than it ever has been. And so I want to start by acknowledging that I'm talking to people in a very, very broad group of circumstances. For example, like even in my country, there are some people right now where things aren't bad at all for them. They would even say they're enjoying this season a little bit. They're sad about what's happening broadly, but for them, they're still getting paid. They may be working from home, or they may be getting paid and not even working at all right now and having good time with their family. And so it's not that bad for them. On the other extreme, I know that there would be those here and certainly abroad that are locked down, cannot work, and don't know how they're going to feed their family today. And so there's that kind of extreme. When it comes to sickness, some of you may have lost people close to you. You've got people that are sick right now and very vulnerable. I know other people that don't know anyone that's tested positive for COVID-19. So there are those extremes. In the business world, there would be those of you that your business or nonprofit is fine. You're kind of holding steady. There'd be a small percentage that you've kind of had a boom because you happen to be in the right niche. And so you've actually had an increase in your business. There would be far more that are trying to hang on right now, maybe laying people off, unfortunately. Some of you might know the doors are going to end up closing and your business isn't going to make it, or you may have already closed the doors as well. Churches, the same thing. There are churches who are trying now to figure out, how do we do church online? You know, for centuries and centuries, we've gathered together in buildings, and now we're moving from buildings to online. And for some, that's working relatively well. For a few, it's working extremely well. You've managed to transfer the giving that was going into plates or buckets normally in the church to giving online, and you're completely fine. There are others, churches who've lost the majority of their income and don't know if they're going to be able to continue. And then you've got the additional burden of not only are you trying to think about your needs of the church, but as a church, you're thinking about the needs of the community. And they're so great around you that you feel the tension of that. And so I just want to acknowledge and recognize that when I'm talking today, I understand there are massive extremes. And so I pray for a little bit of grace on your end, and knowing that we really do have a broad extreme. If I'm not hitting exactly where you are, I am thinking about where our different leaders are. The other thing I want to acknowledge is that you as leaders, you feel the weight more than a lot of people around you. In other words, there are some people, they're upset because they have lost their job, or they might be losing their job, or because of sickness in their family. You, on the other hand, you might be thinking about dozens of people's jobs that report to you that you're responsible for. Could be hundreds, could be thousands. You also recognize you're not just looking at who's sick, who's working, who's not, but you're looking possibly at the broader economic impact that in all over the world it hits us. In some nations, it's extraordinarily devastating and will be hard for people to survive. And so you're looking at things on a different level, thinking about them. We know that it's relatively easy to lead during good times. If things are going great, you can kind of show up and coast. This is not an easy time. And so your leadership may be tested right now. You may feel a little bit insecure about your decisions. Join the club. None of us know how to have been here before. We're trying to figure it out. I don't have all the answers. My gosh, I pray I never come across like I have all the answers. But what I want to do is kind of just talk about what I'm learning and talk about some of the questions that you have. And hopefully we can add value to each other's lives in the next 55 minutes or so. So let's just take a step back and recognize we're in a global crisis. And what do we know about crisis? We know that every crisis creates unexpected problems. You know that right now. You're dealing with them. They're all around you. Every crisis creates unexpected problems, but every crisis also creates unprecedented opportunities. We have to remember that. If we can recognize that even though there are challenges right now, as the world shifts, as there's massive disruption creates opportunities. And anytime you feel like you're lacking and don't have what you want, that creates the perfect environment for innovation. Innovation is born out of limitations. And so when you're wrestling with what to do right now, it's easy to let the problems overwhelm you. But I would just encourage you, don't allow the urgent problems to blind you from the emerging opportunities. I'll just say it again, just to kind of get it in your brain, is don't allow all the urgent problems, the challenges, the tensions to rob you from seeing the opportunities that could be around the corner. And when I think about the opportunities, they would fall generally into three categories. One would be financial opportunities. In other words, there are going to be buying opportunities. For example, we're a church that meets in 34, almost 35 locations, and we're often trying to find land and buildings. The chances are that real estate in many places here is going to go on sale. There are going to be buying opportunities for us to get properties perhaps we couldn't have before. The same would be true in whatever your category of leadership would be. There'll also be investing opportunities, because there's going to be a lot of fire sales. There's going to be business opportunities, meaning if you can see a niche, if you can see a way to add value, if you can see a way to meet needs or to make a difference, there are going to be a lot of new businesses spin up. And so this crisis is going to create financial opportunities. A second type of opportunity, I would say, is it creates what I'd call strategic opportunities. In other words, you as a leader right now, there are probably some problems in your organization that you were just overlooking. You weren't dealing with them because things weren't that bad. But now this crisis gives you permission. It gives you kind of air coverage to go ahead and deal with those problems. It gives you an excuse to deal with them. It might be that you were a little bit heavy in some expenses. Now this crisis gives you the opportunity to eliminate some of those higher expenses. You might be able to cut a program or a department that you should have cut a long time ago. You might cancel a service, something that wasn't profitable or wasn't meeting needs. And so this creates financial opportunities, it creates strategic opportunities, and then it creates missional opportunities. It now gives us a chance to make a difference in the lives of people that we might not have had before. Because the reality is that more people have different needs, and now we have new ways to impact people that are in need that weren't in need before. Kind of in what I do, I'm a pastor of a church. And so when I look at some of the churches around in my community, there are some that are being innovated and they're using this to make a difference. They've turned their parking lots into testing centers for COVID-19. Some people now are doing parking lot giveaways where hundreds of people come that need food, need toilet paper, need essential supplies, and the churches are meeting the needs of the community in that way. Now we're seeing churches doing, online discipleship or online evangelism. We've got places that are inviting their church members to come into a safe environment to donate blood or to make masks or to deliver groceries. And so what we see in my part of the world is, okay, now there are new needs. How can we do what we do to meet the needs in our community? And so as a business leader, as a civic leader, as a nonprofit leader, if you look around, you're going to have financial opportunities, you're going to have strategic opportunities, and you're going to have missional opportunities. So don't let all the problems, all the tension, all the things that feel urgent rob you from coming up above the problems to survey the scope of the community and say, how can we also make a difference in this? Where are the opportunities in the middle of all of the chaos? Now, I want to give you a little context to where I am because, like I said earlier, I know that something in Canada is going to be different than in France, and the environment's really different. Where I live is I live in the middle of the United States. If this is the United States, I'm kind of right down here in the middle. I'm in a moderately populated state. In other words, this is not like Montana where there are very few people. It's not like New York where it's jam-packed. We're kind of moderately populated, and our state is not hit as hard as some of the other states. So this week, and I know this would be different all over the world, some of you are back in full swing, others won't be for a long time, but this week, as of Friday, today's Thursday, tomorrow, restaurants are opening back up, salons have already opened up, malls are opening up. This weekend, churches have permission to meet again. And so that's the context of where I live right now. We're in a different season. If we'd been talking 3 weeks ago, we're in an earlier season. Now, in many parts of the world, or at least in some parts of the world, we're starting to open back up and figure out how do we re-enter. What I'm thinking about in my mind is three things. I'm thinking about re-entry, rebuilding, and redeeming. How do we re-enter the world that we kind of used to know? How do we rebuild whatever we've lost? And then how do we redeem this time? In my mind, in this season, and again, it may be a little bit different where you are, but everybody eventually will be here. How do we re-enter? How do we rebuild? And how do we redeem? Let's talk about re-entering and rebuilding first, because how and when we re-enter as a business leader or as a church leader or whatever, it really does matter. In my world, as a church leader, whenever we meet, what I know is I'm going to be criticized. They're going to be, if we go in early, we're going to be criticized. People are going to think you're being reckless. If we go in the middle, they're going to say, why didn't you go in early? Don't you care about people? If we go in late, they're going to say, you're being selfish. You're not, you really don't have any kind of ministry. There is no right time where we're not going to be criticized. In whatever you do, you just kind of have to get that in your mind that you're going to be criticized. Whatever you do, there is no right or wrong way. So as often as you can with your team members, your constituency, whoever listens to your voice, wherever you have influence, what you want to do is you want to clearly explain why you're doing what you're going to do. People are more likely to go along with the what if you give them the why. What's going to happen is you've processed this with your leaders, whatever you're going to do, and you spent hours going over this, and then you come out and you give like a decision and say, this is what we're going to do. And the rest of the team hasn't had time to process. They don't know what's going on, how you got to your decision. And so when you communicate, you want to be as detailed as you possibly can about the re-entry strategy and about the rebuilding strategy. And it's like for me, what I've done is I've told them, here's where I was hesitant. Here's why I was afraid to do this. Here's what I know people are going to say. And so I'm taking kind of all the rebuttals, and then I'm saying, and here's why we chose this, and here's what we're going to do about it, and here's why we're going in now. And this really, really matters. I'll give you just a brief example, and I hope that this might apply to something that you're dealing with. For example, our church would be allowed to meet this Sunday, and there are going to be a lot of churches that do. We're not going to meet this Sunday. And I'm explaining to our church the reason we're not going to meet this Sunday is here's how we're going to decide when we're going to meet. Number one is First qualification is we need our leaders to tell us when they believe it's safe and within which parameters. That's happened. The second thing is we're going to meet whenever we feel 100% ready to do quality ministry in a safe environment. And we're not there yet. We meet in a lot of different locations. And so we have 50,000 masks coming in, and they're not in our hands yet. So we're not starting. We also have the hand sanitizers, and what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to create a completely touchless, safe environment. And I'm explaining this to our church family, where you can walk in, not touch anybody. There'll be no refreshments. There's going to be no childcare, no kids ministry, so kids aren't climbing over each other. And but we are going to go in a little bit earlier. We're not going to wait until later on. And then I help our people understand this. What's going to be perceived is people are going to say that's a financial decision. They're going to think you're doing this for the money because you need to meet to have the money. What I'm going to explain to them is our giving right now is 100% or even up, meaning we were already really strong online. We've transitioned almost all of our giving to online. Our revenue has not gone down. This is not a financial decision because when we meet on the weekends in 34 locations, we'll have 100% of the cost to meet at those locations with a vastly reduced impact because we have to keep the rooms small. We have to social distance. And so it's actually not a good financial decision. It's a bad financial decision. What this is it's not a money decision. It's a ministry decision. Just like hospitals are open for people that are sick, we believe the church, and when we can do it safe, needs to be open for people who are hurting, people who are depressed, people who are suicidal, people who need genuine ministry. And so what I'm doing is I'm trying to be really, really clear as to why. There are other churches, they won't be going in until probably June, and part of the reason is because of where they live. They're in a much more dangerous area where there's a lot more sickness, or their auditoriums are bigger. Ours are actually smaller. We can do this well. So all this to say, why? Whenever you re-enter, whenever you're going to rebuild, you want to tell them why. Now, what do we know? In the early season of this, I told our leaders, what we're going to do is we're going to think long-term, but we're only going to make short-term decisions. In other words, there is never a time in this season where I promise you, I've never even said 2 weeks from now, this. Okay, I told our team, we're gonna go week to week, day to day, because the mood changes, the news changes, and so we're not making any kind of declarations like in June, we're gonna be doing this, because we don't know what we're gonna be doing in June. I wanna encourage you, again, in this same season, is think long term. In other words, just because, like in Oklahoma, businesses are opening up on Friday does not mean we go back to normal on Friday. We're going to wake up in August and September and October, and at best, we're going to still have tremendous economic headwind with the economy trying to recover as we've lost, millions of jobs have just vanished into the universe. Businesses are closing. And so the light switch doesn't just go back on. What we're going to do is we're going to think long term. This could be 2021, we're still dealing with it. It could be longer as the economy recovers. We don't know. So we're going to think long term, but we're not going to make long-term verbal projections. That's just crazy. My peers, I've had a lot of churches say, we're opening June the 7th. Like, why do you do that? Because if we go in the next weekend and things work and the numbers don't go back up and then you've got 4 more weeks before your meeting, why make that decision now? You don't know what's going to happen. June 7th may be too early. We may go in and go, this was not wise, we're going to pull back. So what we're doing is we're deciding week to week, even day to day. We're thinking long term, but we're not making definitive statements over the long haul. We're going to be crystal clear in communicating. What I want to encourage you is, I cannot overstate this. In my organizations now, I normally talk to the whole church in what I call insider communication once a month. Now it's once a week. For our staff, I normally talk to our whole staff together 4 times a year. That's it. And then I do little video updates. Now it's at least weekly, oftentimes multiple times a week, talking to the whole entire staff. Increase your communication. Communicate more than you think you should, and then double it, okay? I promise you, communicate more than you think you should, and then double it. When you do communicate, just tell the truth, even if the news is not good. If you're looking at, we may not be able to open the doors back up, revenue's down 60%, we're going to be laying people off, whatever it is, tell the truth, because people can handle bad news better than no news and the fear of that comes with not knowing. We're just going to be forthright. We're going to tell them the truth. Again, don't project too far. What we're going to do is we're going to try to speak confidently, but not definitively. Confidently, but not definitively. Now, this is the most important part to me in our time together, and then I'm going to hand it off to Tom here in a moment for questions, is we don't want to just re-enter and we don't want to just rebuild. What we want to do is, as leaders, we want to try to redeem this crisis. What we want to try to bring something good out of this crisis. That's what great leaders do. It was Winston Churchill who said, "Never waste a good crisis." I like the quote. I probably wouldn't call this a good crisis, but I would say, yeah, as leaders, we're not going to waste this. We're going to try to redeem it. We're going to try to bring something good out of this. My bias would be this. So many people say, let's go back to normal. I just want to get back to normal. I don't want to get back to normal. As a leader, I want to get back to better than normal. Whatever normal was, I want to get back to better than normal. In my context, in the church world, in kind of middle America, USA, there was a lot of spiritual apathy. People took the church for granted, took God for granted. I don't want to go back to that. What I want to do is I want to take this, I want to redeem it. I want to say, how can we use this to increase a real, sincere spiritual passion? That's kind of my industry, and your industry, whatever it would be, you want to try to redeem it. So I'm going to suggest to you, this is really, really simple, but I beg you to ask these questions. 3 questions every leader should ask to try to redeem this crisis. Here's what you're going to notice. If your business or your nonprofit is surviving right now, in other words, you still have life going on, I can almost guarantee you're surviving without something that you thought was previously necessary. The doors are still open, you still have employees, you're still providing a service, you're still providing product. You're doing it without something that you previously thought was absolutely essential. That's why question number 1 that you're going to ask is this, to redeem it, is what should we stop or reduce? What should we stop doing? Where should we cut back? What should we eliminate? What, as leaders, should we stop doing or reduce as we move forward into a different reality because of what we learned during this time? And I would encourage you to apply that both personally to your own personal life outside of work, your family, and then I would also really encourage you to ask it specifically organizationally or for your business or nonprofit. For example, personally, you might say, stop or reduce. We're not going to have the kids involved in so many activities. Kind of like in my home, my kids haven't been going to dance and soccer, and so we've had more time. Why in the world were we over-programming? So that might be a conclusion for you. You might say, we're going to block off 1 night a week for family time. We're not going to be so busy. You might say, I'm not going to travel like I used to because I was able to keep the business going without as much travel. I'm going to cut back. Whatever it is. Family-wise, personally, what should you stop? What should you reduce? Now, organizationally, this is probably why most of you are on here, I would encourage you, stop doing something, stop investing somewhere, stop reducing because of what we learned was unnecessary in the way we were thinking. For you, it might be unnecessary spending. I know in my organization, there's a lot of places we were spending money. I'm going, you know what? We don't need to spend there. It might be unproductive expenses. It might be unhelpful meetings. Suddenly you realize we don't have to do that meeting all the time. It might be unnecessary advertising. We're not advertising there, but we're still getting good results. It might be that you cut or reduce marginally effective activities, meaning we were doing that, no one really liked it, it didn't really make a difference. It might be that you don't hire back what you now deem as unnecessary positions. We're doing fine without the work that is producing, and so we eliminate. If you don't eliminate or reduce something, I'd say you're wasting this crisis. I promise you, over time, we all increase in unnecessary adventures, unnecessary expenses, unnecessary activities. So you're going to ask yourself to redeem it. What are we going to reduce? What are we going to stop? Where are we going to cut back? My office team, I have, in just my personal office, I have 3 assistants and an intern. And our number 1 assignment next week is to get together and look at it. Where are we going to cut? When we go back in, we're not going back to normal. We're going to be leaner. We're going to be more efficient. We're going to be more focused. Question number 1, what should we reduce or stop? Question number 2, what should we start or increase? What should we start or what should we leverage? hopefully somewhere in this process, and I'm sure if you look at it objectively, you'll say this is true, you didn't just face the problems, but you saw some opportunities. Financial, strategic, missional. The times that we become innovative is generally not when we have more resources, more time. Generally, we become innovative whenever we have less of something. It's the lack of something that drives the innovation. So now you can't meet physically, you can't have the doors open, whatever. By taking something away, it forced you to be innovative. Limitations are the breeding ground for innovation. I'll give you an example again from my industry, and I apologize, I'm just a pastor, I'm not a business person, but in my industry, we created something years ago that we called Church Online. It was the first, it wasn't just a streaming platform for churches, it's a highly interactive, highly engaging online community with language translation, private prayer rooms, the ability to give. It's a really world-class online engagement tool. And we gave it away to churches. We had about 3,000 churches using this free online platform before COVID-19. Now we have over 25,000 signed up. So if you can imagine, going from 3,000 to 25,000, just the onboarding alone was an extraordinary feat for our team to pull off. But what we realize is now there are thousands and thousands of churches who say, oh, meeting in a physical building is not the only way to reach people that are far from God. Meeting in a physical building is not the only way to minister to people and create community. So ding, 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 ding. All of a sudden we have new opportunities appearing. What do you need to start, or what's working now that you want to add fuel to it? A couple of things that we learned in this process that we're going to keep some version of would be this. One is, since we meet in 10 different states, 34 different locations, I just can't get together with everybody to do leadership training. And suddenly we invited our leaders to come and do an online training on YouTube Live. And it wasn't just something where we're streaming, but there was interaction where I could talk directly to the people. It was profoundly personal. And oh my gosh, why would we not do this more often? And so that was an innovation that we're going to take with us. Another thing we did is we started doing a midweek online service that had really a significant impact. And so it hit us. Okay, well, we can't meet everywhere because of limitations on, let's say, Good Friday each year. But what we could do is we could do an online Good Friday service. So those are a couple of innovations that have come through that we're going to keep because of this. And so you're going to ask yourself, what should we reduce or stop? What should we start or increase? And then number 3 is, how should we think differently? This is so important. How should we think differently? The way you think matters. I always tell our leaders, don't copy what someone does because you're not them. You can't do what they do, but learn how they think. Get inside their mind. For us, again, in our context, is now we're thinking, okay, there are new ways to reach people far from God. There are new ways to have a front door to the church. There are new ways to think about how we meet the needs of people. There are new ways to do leader training. There are new ways to help people be generous and to give through the church. And even what we're doing right now. I can't be in, let's say, London right now. I could have been in London in a room with 200 of you, and that would have been pretty amazing. Or we could do what we're doing now. I could be talking to you in multiple countries to thousands of different leaders because we've learned to think differently. It doesn't just have to be about presence, but we can have a broader impact. And so think about, how can we be fast? How can we be agile? How can we think more like a startup so we can adapt quickly? Leadership is always important. It's never been more important than now. When you lead, I'm about to hand it over to Tom, but when you lead, I just hope that you'll lead with confidence and hope. Be confident. We're going to figure this out. We're going to make wise decisions. We're not going to get it right every time, but we do have the right people. We're going to make wise decisions, and we will make a difference. And then I just pray that you do have hope. We know that bad news sells because people are always looking for a reason to be afraid. What do we know that's stronger than fear? Hope is the only thing stronger than fear. And what I, as a spiritual person, I have hope in a power that is far greater than I am. I have faith that I've got great people around me. And I just believe that in hard times, good leaders rise. And I believe there are good leaders all around us. And so what are we going to do? We're going to recognize, yes, there are problems, but there are also opportunities. And I believe on the other side of this, we're not going to waste it. We're going to come out stronger. We're we're going to come out making a bigger difference, because whenever the world grows darker, the light always shines brighter. And you as leaders, you're that light. You're the voice of hope. Don't be afraid. Believe that you can lead through it, and we can make a difference in the lives of people. So Tom, I'm going to hand it over to you. I'd love to talk about some questions, and we'll dive into kind of your personal worlds.
Awesome, Craig. Great talk. When you talk about hope and faith and good leaders rising, I know that the leaders that are in this conversation really want that and want to be able to hang on to that as well. And especially asking those three questions, how significant that is, and even having that positive idea of what would it look like to get better, back to better than normal. And that is kind of a hopeful idea and a thought and vision as we look at it. Some of the questions we're having, Craig, really are looking more at the internal side of a leader, especially as we get more weeks out in this pandemic environment. So Janine from South Africa asks, how do you maintain an outward calm when there's an inner storm?
It's a good question, Janine. How do you maintain an outward calm when there's an inner storm? I would say this, that I think there are times when you don't need to always remain outwardly calm. In other words, I hope you don't fall apart and cry in front of people and just like go, the world's coming to an end, what are we going to do? But I think there are times when you actually do acknowledge your fears and you acknowledge your uncertainties. We know this, that people may admire your strengths, but they tend to connect with you based on your weaknesses. And so they're going to admire you for being a good leader. They're going to have respect because you've gotten to where you are based on your hard work or your integrity or your faithfulness. But every now and then when you just come in and say, we've never been here before, and I'm not quite sure. This makes me afraid. I'm afraid of, I don't want to lay people off. I'm not sure how we're going to make it. And so you can kind of start there. And then what you do is you kind of almost talk yourself into a confidence. And this is kind of what I do. The whole, when does the church go back in? This is a massive, massive challenge, because if we go back in and what's perceived to be too early, they're going to take my head off. At the same time, I'm not called to please popular public. I'm called to minister to the people that God's entrusted in my care. And I know there are a lot of them not doing well right now. So I've got that tension. And so what I told our team is, kind of what I told you is like, I'm not quite sure. There's no blueprint for this. I'm really nervous. I know this is going to be challenging. And then I kind of talk myself through it. But let's remember why we do what we do. We do it because we care about people. And then I kind of talk, and the leaders around me, this is what we're seeing, this is what we're believing. So when we go in together. So I'm almost like appropriately processing the very same things people are doing, and then you're leading to a calm. And I just want to say it, you're leading yourself there, and you're leading your people there. If you just act calm like there's nothing wrong, you're really like superhuman and not even, how do they connect with you? So you don't have to be flawless. You don't have to be fearless. You don't have to be perfect. You can be a human being and then lead yourself to it. What I'm just kind of telling myself in my world is the church has endured more than this. The church will survive. And so I'm talking myself into it. I've always believed in the leaders around me. I still believe in the leaders around me. We will figure this out. And so you process it, meditate on what you know is true, and then just you really ultimately have to trust that this is when leaders rise, and you're going to be one of those people. So Janine, don't freak out if you show a little weakness. I think your team will love you even more if you show weakness, but lead yourself to calm and confident, and then you can lead them to it as well.
Yeah. Good, Craig. Excellent counsel. Really appreciate that. Just want to remind people, too, there's a place on the screen where you can put in questions. We invite you in real time right now to put those in, and we'll be able to ask Craig some of the questions that you have, and he can respond to those as well. This question's from Deepu from India, and he asks, what are some of the common mistakes leaders are making during this time?
Yeah, Deepu, good question. What are some of the common mistakes leaders are making right now? I think one of them is one I alluded to earlier, is they're making definitive statements too far into the future. I see this all the time, is, in June, we're going to be doing this. Like, you have no idea what's going to happen in June. So I think that's one of the most common things I see. Another thing is kind of like to Janine's question is I see people trying to motivate people through this instead of actually lead through it. There's kind of this sense of it's going to be fine and we're going to be great. And that's just sometimes not true. In other words, it may not be fine for a little while. And so we don't motivate through this. we lead through this. Another mistake I think is that with some of my peers is I'm like, why aren't you talking to the people more? You're processing, you're asking me, we're discussing, but when's the last time you've led your people? And that's the whole communicate. It's like crazy. I think the other thing is we have to be crazy nimble, fast, make changes in a day or in a matter of a few hours. I think when you look back on the other side of this, some things we're going to recognize is we need to be really wise and be just ready for crisis, meaning those that were highly leveraged financially are more in trouble today. Those without cash are in trouble today. Those who weren't dealing with problems in the past, they're catching up with us today. Trying to think any more kind of common problems, mistakes that I'm seeing. I would say this, being emotionally moved daily by the news. There's so much fake news out there. There's so many extremes. If you're only reading, watching, or listening to one side, you get kind of what I'd call every side is incredibly biased. And so what that does is that triggers you emotionally. And as leaders, we don't want to be reacting emotionally. We want to be leading intentionally. And so you want to be kind of calm. Like for me, my consumption of media is really limited. I have a couple of people who go through everything, find the articles and the things that they think are most helpful to me, and then I'm in it 30 minutes a day at most, and I'm out. You spend 2, 3, 4 hours a day watching whatever, and you're going to become an emotional mess. What I want is I want the high points. I want good information. We're not going to read headlines. Headlines are a joke. Headlines are written by someone that didn't even write the article, and they're clickbait. They're ridiculous. They're stupid. We're not going to believe everything that we read or watch. We're going to look for good information, and we're not going to become emotionally highly engaged in this. We're going to stay objective and try to stay above it. So those would be a few things that come to mind.
Yeah, good, Craig. This is, again, a question just in. Do you think that this crisis will have an impact for several months or more like a year or two? And should we even think or prepare to operate as we did before with regard to meetings and touring and people working in offices and different kinds of things that way?
Yeah, so I appreciate the fact that you think I might have an answer to that question, but I just don't know. Are things going to go back to normal? And I think the real answer is in some places things may go more back to normal than in others. Certainly in developing nations, the impact could be for years and years to come. My guess would be, and this is only a guess, like I'm not an economist, I'm a local pastor who is a student of leadership. That's all I am. My guess would be that anytime you lose, tens of millions of jobs, some of those will come back. Anytime you start just writing stimulus checks like crazy, like in our nation, and kind of increasing the debt, that puts a fracture on the economy. And so I would think that depending on where you are, for example, I'm in an energy-driven economy, and with oil prices where they are, it could impact us longer than in some other places. In my mind, what I'm doing is I'm bracing myself for a longer economic climb. If we don't have that, then I'll just be pleasantly surprised. But I'm not hopeful that we're going to go back to a normal economy, because then I could be disappointed. I'm expecting it to be more difficult, and then I could be pleasantly surprised. If I'm not, at least I'll be prepared. And then as far as my opinions about the rest of things, my gut is, and I have a lot of people who are saying they're never going to a concert again, they're never going to a sporting event again, like ever. I think that's honestly kind of stupid. I think that we'll either find a cure, we'll find a prevention, or we'll find a way to live with this. I think people are social creatures, so my gut is, and again, I could be dead wrong, my gut is people will be gathering again faster rather than shorter. People like to travel, people like to see their relatives. My gut is that end of the world will go back faster than normal, but I think the economy is going to drag behind it. And again, I could be a false prophet, and what I told you is just my opinion. That's all it is an opinion.
Appreciate your opinion on that, Craig. This one is around keeping connection. It comes from Ronnie from Barbados, and he asks, how does a leader remain connected and proximate in a time of and season of distance?
So Ronnie, I'm not sure the context in which you're asking the question. I'm going to assume perhaps it's with your team members because that really matters. What's interesting is our team, like yours, I'm sure, we've been meeting online in lots of different ways. And one of the things I found, and this wasn't my idea, but our team loves to just do fun meetings. Meaning we're just going to have a meet up and hang out. We're going to have lunch together. We're going to sit there. Someone's in their pajamas. Someone else is in a sweatsuit, and they're in their living room. They're on their back porch, and they're just eating together and not talking business. And so I think what I didn't project on the front end is how much work matters. Like work is important. Work is a gift. And so what we want to do is we want to give people the ability to contribute. But also the side benefit of work is like if you're in a healthy place, relationships just matter. And so it gave me a new appreciation for encourage them to get together and to just do something fun. Don't just look at the productive value of work, but look at the relational value of work. And I think you're intuitively asking that. And so the great news is with technology, you can just do it. You can FaceTime, you can get on Zoom calls, you can do kind of what we're doing now. And I would just say, like in my mind right now, what I'm doing is I'm going to personal earlier in the conversation with people. I'm asking about their families on the front end. How are they doing? What about their relatives? I'm asking about their kids. And so I think if you just, in all of your interactions, if you elevate the personal connection, not the professional connection, but if you elevate the personal connection up front, and just do that in your mind, you're saying, I care about you for who you are, not just for what you do. And that's so, so important. This whole crisis gives us the excuse, it gives us the reminder that our people are not commodities. They're not valuable because of what they do for our organizations, they're valuable for who they are. And if you can just kind of remember that and take it to a personal connection, then you're going to have a bond that's going to make your team, your organization, your leader stronger in the years to come. So I appreciate you asking that question, and I know your team will feel your love as you connect with them.
That's great insight, Craig. Maybe just a quick follow-up to what have you seen as far as how people are responding to some of the personal questions and more conversation before you jump into some of the production issues?
Yeah, I think, for example, like this morning, my assistant's in the background, and you can't see her, and she has 3 other ladies that report to her. And so I was kind of asking her about how they're doing, how their kids doing, and it just, that's not natural to me. What's natural to me is come in and just put my head down and work. But because of what we're going through, it's just elevated, and now it's kind of to the point of it's just natural. Like I care, it's on my mind, and so there's just a deeper sense of we're not doing a job together, but we're kind of. And here, let me chase a rabbit real quick. This is my opinion again. What we don't want is our goal is not to, like in church world, like we're a big family. I don't want the goal to be a family, because if my goal is I want us to feel like a family, then I won't ever fire anybody who's not doing a good job. And the reality is, like in my world, if spiritual matters and you're not doing a good job, then you don't get to play here. And so my goal is not to be a family. My goal is to be so productive together, so missional focused, that we end up caring really, really deeply about ourselves. And the byproduct is we feel like a family. It's not a goal, it's the byproduct. It's kind of like if you've been through a tragedy together, you feel a bond. Those of you who play sports, you may not like your teammate, but when you compete together, I may not like him, but you can't mess with him because he's my teammate. You feel like family, just like your own brother. You may not like your brother sometimes, but you don't mess with my family. And so there's this real sense of, because we're in this together, and that I care about you. The byproduct is we really, really gel. And so I think, like in our context, I think this has drawn us closer, even though we're physically separated, because we recognize we really do love doing this together. And that's a whole other side part of business, leadership, whatever. Is we want the mission to be so clear. We want the vision to be, it's not like my team is here serving my vision, but we're here together doing the vision, and so that just bonds us. And so it's a good question, Tom. I think it's we can come out stronger relationally on the other end if we do those touch points and really do care about people.
Yeah, fully agree. Great perspective on that. And again, some of the other more subtle nuances of leadership, and especially happening during this time. I think this one comes from Banu in India, and he asks, many organizations are already struggling with change fatigue. How do we motivate teams to be resilient and keep moving towards the vision?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And in fact, I'm going to talk about this a little bit in more detail at this year's Global Leadership Summit, which I hope that you guys will get to be a part of as well. And I appreciate that you're in our community. And so one of the things that I have to tell myself is I need to change how I think about change. And I'm guessing, Manu, most likely in your context, or at least here in the United States, a lot of times people say, people just don't like change. Nobody likes change. People hate change. And that's just not true. When you think about it, people like to change their hair, they change their wardrobe, they change where they eat. Restaurants, a lot of times, they like to change where they travel, they like to change out their kitchen, their decorations. People do like change. Whenever we say they don't like change, what we need to understand is they just don't like the way we try to change them. If we come in and just try to change things without giving context, without giving a reason, that really creates a problem. So again, that's why we give the why, the why, the why, the why. Anytime we try to change something, there's going to be three different groups of people. You're going to have your critics who just hate everything. You're going to have the advocates, those who are for what you're doing, and then you're going to have the bystanders. Whenever you give the why, what the why does is the why can disarm the critics. If someone's like, that's a stupid idea, and you give them the why, at least a thinking and mature critic might say, oh, okay, that makes sense. It disarms them. Then the why empowers the advocates. They were already for you, but now they have your language, they have your context, they have your understanding, that gives them talking points. It empowers them. The bystanders, which is a lot of people like, I don't really care, what it does is it motivates them. It might bring them into the battle to say, oh, that really is a good idea. Oh, I see why we're doing that. And they move from being just a bystander to being an advocate for you. Now, it can be incredibly challenging emotionally when we're whipping all over the place. And that's why, like I was saying here, what I've told our team again and again and again and again is I'm thanking them, going, we're going to change, we're going to pivot, we don't know what's coming, we're going to be more agile than ever, we're going to be flexible, and then I'm acknowledging, okay, what I'm asking of you is a lot. So what will happen is if I change directions, in my mind it might be relatively simple, but down line, I've just created a really complicated mess for the people that are actually doing it. And so we're going to come in and acknowledge, I know what I'm asking is massive. I know you're making tremendous sacrifices. What I want you to know is what you're doing really matters. And so you just kind of acknowledge it and tell them going in what you want to is you want to set the expectation. During this time, we don't know what's coming, so we're going to be changing a lot. And it's not necessarily going to be easy, but guess what? We're going to get great at it. And so, you kind of, again, you lead them to it. Help them know why, clearly explain. And then when they come back and say, this is impossible, it may be impossible. Like you may want to listen and say, okay, I agree. Let's look at another plan. Or you may want to help them problem solve and help them see why it is possible. And so it's not top-down change. Here's what we're doing, you little people who work for me. It's here's where we want to go. Let's figure out how we get there together. And so it's a team effort, and they feel a part of it. And it's kind of basic leadership. It's the why. It's that we're going together. And then if they understand the destination, not only will they help you, not only will they follow your idea to get there, but they'll add value to it. They'll bring their own ideas. They'll help you get there faster. So it's not me telling you how we're changing. It's more me telling you where we want to go, and let's figure out how we get there together. And so we're not top-down command change. It's wisdom and leadership and collaborative work toward getting to the desired destination.
That's good, Craig. Really good on the key skill building, even during this time. This question comes in from Maurice in the Netherlands and says, I lead a nonprofit. Half of the budget comes from companies who don't support us anymore. What ways do you have for organizations to find stability? There's been a lot of questions that have been coming in kind of around kind of the financial issues that are going on right now and loss of income. So what do you have for organizations in finding stability when maybe some companies or people are stepping back in their support?
Marisa, that's a challenge. And our church puts out something called the YouVersion Bible app. It's on about 434 million devices, if my last number is correct. And so we spend millions and millions of dollars on that. We've got probably 45 people on the team. And we have a primary donor whose business was hit really, really hard. And so the leaders talked to us and said, basically told us how they're going to scale back, and it's significant. It's a lot of money, and so we feel that too. And I think most likely, pretty much everybody in the nonprofit world is going to feel that in some way. Depending on what you do, what your nonprofit is in Sweden, some of them are less interesting to the general public right now than others. Meaning, if you're feeding people, if you're getting masks out, there's high interest. If you're just like a social organization, or you're, maybe helping kids read right now, there's not as much emphasis, and so you lost like social collateral to the broader community. One of the things you might want to do is ask, how can you attract interest right now? And I'll give you an example. For us, when we went from 3,000 churches at Church Online to 25,000, our cost went up 5 times. And we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, just boom, 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 boom. And so in a time when, revenue might be going down most places, our expenses went up. So what we did is we helped attract interest to a small part of our ministry. And we've been able to raise a lot of money by highlighting that. If there's a small part of your nonprofit that really does match the needs right now, highlight that like crazy. And then you're going to have to go and recreate interest. So when we're losing top donors in one area now, because the YouVersion Bible app still does have interest, we're going into other businesses, other Christian organizations, and trying to stir up interest. Whenever revenue goes down, there's a couple things you do. Cut expenses and try to find new places. And so, again, I wish I could give you more, but you're going to get your expenses down as much as you can. And then you're going to take whatever you do and tell the story in a way that is most currently interesting. That means you might change the narrative right now. So if you'd asked me 8 weeks ago, we were specialists in reaching people far from God. If you'd asked me now, we're specialists in helping meet needs of people in the community. Okay, they're both true. But right now, the way I'm telling the story is I'm not saying we're just highly evangelistic. What I'm saying is we're highly involved in the community. So tell the story in the way that best creates interest. And then sometimes you have to just go recreate it. You might have to recreate your nonprofit, or go honestly, it could be a tough few years. You might recreate it. You might go find some new donors. But Marisa, I wish you the best in what you're doing.
Yeah. Really challenging that way, Craig, but very helpful input as well. This question comes from Roger in South Africa. If there's something that we need to stop or reduce, how do we do that in a positive manner?
Yeah, that's a good question, Roger, because a lot of times, anytime you cut something back, it feels like a loss. And I think some of the things you want to do is you kind of want to create a culture that expects this. And so I'll tell our team all the time is the only thing you can count on for sure that's not going to change is that we're going to be changing a lot. And so as often as you can build a culture that expects change is coming, then it's easier to change whenever you do need to change. On the cutbacks, as a person of faith, there's a story in Scripture that just talks about you pruning. Sometimes you cut back to create more growth. And well, of course, if you are a gardener, you would know that. And so you could talk about, hey, what we recognize right now is we had an expense toward this place, and it's just not as productive anymore. What we want to do is we want to allocate it somewhere else. And again, if this is my area and we're cutting back over here, I feel a significant loss. And so what we have to do is we have to really, really help them understand the why. And then we want to try to create a vision to something better, meaning I know I'm giving up this, but I'm giving up this for that. And if I can help make that look more attractive than this, then it lessens the loss. And again, the why really matters. Sometimes what happens is, Roger, is some people are just unwilling to give that up. That can often be an indication that they either need a different mindset or they need to be in a different place, because we can't let our own personal biases keep us from doing what's right. And so we're going to tap into here's why we're doing it. We're going to try to motivate with emotion toward the new place. We know that facts educate, but emotion motivates. And so we want to try to give, here's why this is better. Here's the fact behind it. Here's the why we're doing it. And then here's what makes it exciting. And so you don't want to ever discount someone's feelings. What you want to say is, I understand this is significant loss because a lot of you spent years of your life investing in this. I know that you love it, and I know that it does create some value. And so I feel that loss too. But as leaders, we don't just go along with what we feel. We look and we know what's best. And so even though we grieve the loss of this, what we do is we're giving this up for something else. And so I know a lot of what I'm saying comes back to you lead, meaning I don't want this to sound condescending, but you lead to it. You acknowledge feelings, you tell the truth, you acknowledge when it's not good, and then you say, but we're doing what's right, and to move towards somewhere else. And then generally people will go along with that if you acknowledge where they are and cast vision for a better tomorrow.
It's really good, Craig. Facts educate and emotions motivate. And that's something that we can grab onto, especially during this time. This question asks, how do I balance caring for people in the short term, particularly staff, and the long-term needs of my business?
Mm-hmm. So the question is, how do I care for the short-term needs of my staff and the long-term needs of my business? What I'm going to tell you is going to sound heartless, but if you don't ultimately care for the long-term needs of your business, then you're going to hurt your staff. And so you have to keep the boat floating for the people to stay alive, right? And so what you want to do is you want to, if you have to make really hard decisions to keep your business alive, you have to make really hard decisions. But when you do, you just do it with tremendous amount of empathy. And there are ways to make the hard decisions that communicate that you don't care about your people, and there are ways to make the hard decisions that do communicate that you care about your people. And so what you do is you want to always start with a kind of a you emphasis, a you focus. A lot of times what happens as leaders is we drift toward narcissism. It just happens. It happens to me. We drift toward a me-focused world, which is this is what I want and this is where I'm taking us. And that's just not good leadership. That's a dictatorship. And so what we want to do is we want to start in, I care about you because I care about your families, because I care about this business, because I care about our clients or our parishioners or whatever it would be. These are the decisions that we're making. And I know that in the short term, this may be difficult for some people, and that crushes me. And you just tell them, it crushes me. But ultimately, my goal is to kind of keep this thing alive. And so, again, it kind of goes back to real leadership. If you put too much toward your employees' needs right now, that 6 months from now you don't have a business, then you didn't help anybody. So you want to keep the big picture in mind the whole time. And if you have to make the hard decisions, it doesn't mean that you're heartless. It means that you actually do care. And I would rather end up losing 2 employees today and having the hard conversation with 2 than to lay off 40 6 months from now. And that's, again, this is the side of leadership that we don't like. And I think we're almost out of time, Tom. I'm going to go and, if it's okay, wrap it up with here and then hand it back to you.
That'd be great.
Yeah, so this is what I want you all to know and hear right now is that this is the hard part, man. Like it's easy to lead when times are good, but in times like this, you're gonna hurt and you're gonna second guess yourself and you're gonna be afraid. And ultimately, there are times when you're just not sure if what you're doing is right. I tell our team, sometimes you have to go with your 7s, meaning on a scale of 1 to 10, there are times when I'm a 10 confident, and there are times when I'm not a 10. If you're not a 10 and you're not an 8, you're just a 7, you got to go with your 7s. And there may be times when, like right now, you may be at a 5, and that's the best you can get. Generally speaking, No decision communicates bad leadership. And so you want to make whatever decision you feel like's best. In this process so far, I've made some decisions I look back on and I think that was it. You hit the right tone. There are other times I think, I missed it. But in my mind, at the moment, based on what I saw, I believe that was right. So you want to do what's right and then just trust the results. And you don't look back, you don't beat yourself up, you don't feel like you're a bad leader because you got here. None of us look great right now. The whole world is in borderline chaos. And so what you want to do is you want to wake up every day and sincerely do your best to care about your people, to add value, and then to go to sleep at the end of the day saying, I did my best. You're not going to get it right. Don't beat yourself up. I'm second guessing every decision that I make. I feel like I've cost people by leading down kind of the wrong direction and having to adjust. But ultimately what I want our people to know, I value you. We're on a team together. We have a mission. We're not going to get it exactly right. But on the other side, we really do believe with great leadership, we can come out better. And again, better might be 2 years from now. Better might be 3 years from now. Better for you might be you close down what you have right now and you start over again. And that's horrible. But some of the best successes come on the other side of failures. And that's just the way it is. The YouVersion Bible app that we have right now, that came on the other side of a failed attempt to do something online with the Bible. And we had to shut that down and then this spun up out of it. And so just want you all to know that I feel for you. I feel with you. I hurt with you. I feel unsure with you, but at the same time, I feel like it's an honor that we are where we are, that there's someone more powerful than us that felt like we were the right people to lead our teams at this place right now. And so I wake up with confidence in that. And I pray wherever you are, whatever you're facing, and I know many of you it's much, 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 much worse than what I'm facing right now, that you'll find confidence that you are where you are because you're supposed to be there. You have what it takes to do what is in front of you. You're not going to get exactly right, but on the other side, you're going to be better, your team's going to be better, and in years to come, we're going to have learned something from this, and I believe on the other side, we're going to have something more special because you're the leader put to lead your team into a better place.
Hey, thanks so much, Craig. Thanks for incredible wisdom and insight that's coming out of your leadership journey, the vulnerability, the authenticity, and your willingness to speak into the leadership journeys of thousands of people that are part of this conversation today. And we really appreciate your willingness to do that. Just want to give you a heads up that if you go to globalleadership.org, you'll be able to access this session until midnight Sunday night, Chicago time. And so we want to make this available for you to be able to go back again and again, and again, glean some of the insights that Craig has provided and have some time to be able to reflect on them as well. So go to globalleadership.org. And as you go there, you'll find other resources on leadership. We want to be here to help you and to be able to support you in your own leadership journey. And there are many, many great resources that can help you grow and support you in your decision making, in your learning, and your influence during this time. Also, you'll find there information on the Global Leadership Summit that's going to be coming up, and we would love to have you be a part of that. You can check out where the closest summit is going to happen to you, and plan on being a part of a great Global Leadership Summit. Great lineup of speakers. Craig Groeschel is going to be a part of that, and we're just looking forward to a great year this year with the summit. We want to say thanks again for joining us. Again, in these challenging times, thank you for daring to lead, for leading well, and leading strong. And we'd encourage you that in your leadership, let your courage be contagious. Thanks for being with us, everybody.